Robin, or whatever his name was trying to get him towards the whole AIDS distant kind of group. And this is where this Mark guy pulled back and was like, wait, do you think HIV causes AIDS? And when Mark was like, oh, I don't know. He's like, what the fuck do you mean you don't know? Hello there, people of the internet, and welcome to another marvellous episode of League of Nerds, if I say so myself. My name is Myles Power, and as always, I'm joined by the fabulous James. Hello, James. Oh yeah, he's not here today, because he's buggered off to America or somewhere. So, it's just me, from the co-host, or I don't know what I'm saying here. It's just me out of the two of us today, but we have a special guest. We have Kitch from Trolling with Logic. Hello there.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, sir. How are you?
Can't complain. So, I invited you on the show, and my topic that we were going to talk about today is, well, it's another documentary. I know how much the internet loves when we do documentaries, and this documentary is called The Other Side of HIV and AIDS, which is pretty interesting. How did you find it?
Well, I believe I was messaging you throughout my viewing of it, saying it went from "this is interesting" to "oh my god, the rage." It started off with "this is interesting," and then the more I went on to it, it was just I could barely watch it. I had to step away from the computer a few times. I even messaging the tool guy saying I was so close to punting my laptop off the off the top of my house. It was.
See, I've become so desensitized to this kind of stuff now. I was able to watch it pretty much in one go, but I can imagine younger me 2 years ago watching this and just getting really wound up. I mean, it is pretty bad. I mean, have you seen House of Numbers?
Believe it or not, I haven't. And I know there's a reason for that. One is probably for the same reason that will probably get my goat as well. And the second is I really want to do a live pwnage of that with Trolling with Logic. Just because I think the best live pwnages are the ones you go in blind. Because you get more of a reaction out of it. But it was that was one I really do actually want to see how bad is this movie.
That was a shameless plug, Kitch. Shameless plug. No, it's a great podcast. You should check it out, guys and girls of the internet. It's pretty good. So anyway, let's do what we always do in the League of Nerds, and we kind of go through the documentary bit by bit. So this one starts off with what was it? It was the press release, wasn't it? Where we had someone saying that this novel virus is the probable cause of AIDS, and then it jumps to 2000 in Hollywood with the Foo Fighters, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just, and I just actually want to start with it starts with all good kind of anti-science documentary start with some sort of quote from a famous scientist. In this case, it was Einstein. And it was saying, question everything. I forgot the actual quote, I didn't actually write it down. But it's kind of ironic from a HIV denialist movie because you know how open they are to being questioned. But I just found it odd also that they said that Robert Gallo did not present any evidence about HIV, or any papers. But there are, when I tried to look up this online, there are HIV deniers trying to get his papers retracted. So that's kind of an odd thing to put in.
Yeah, I mean, well, HIV denialists or dissidents, whatever you want to call them, aren't known for being, being cohesive
Consistent.
or anything. Consistent, that's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, so anyway, with the movie, so it starts with the Foo Fighters, which I actually found out, I remember back in 2000 when I was on their website, I used to be a massive Foo Fighters fan. Did you used to like them?
The Foo Fighters, I never really got into them. I didn't particularly dislike them. I don't really get into too many bands. I kind of like different songs from here and there. But following bands I would not actually do, except for the Dropkick Murphys. But they're the only band I'd actually actively follow.
Right, I was going to say, how old are you, by the way?
I'm 26.
Oh, God, I'm so old. Like, God, yeah, I remember. So back in like early 2000s, you would have been a wee burn.
I would have been a young lad, yeah. I would have been 10, 11 when, around that time.
Oh, God. No, thanks for that. I feel really old. Yeah, anyway, so 16, 17-year-old me was loving the Foo Fighters. And I remember seeing a link on the front page of their website to Alive and Well with AIDS Alternatives, which is an AIDS denialist group. Mm-hmm. Sorry, brief. Founded by Christine Majori, who actually is in this film.
Yeah, I was surprised to see her. No, I was just surprised to see her, but then again, I'm not too certain how prominent she is. But I see that she is actually quite prominent in the HIV denialist. So,
well, she was. Unfortunately, Christine passed away a fair few years ago. But obviously before she passed away, she was spreading this idea that HIV isn't the cause of AIDS and that HIV tests are useless. And this documentary opens up with her saying this in front of an audience who the Foo Fighters were playing for. And this, I remember when I first saw this, because when I was doing my mini-series on House of Numbers, the other AIDS denialist film, and it was just shocking, because all these people were just, they were cheering, they were taking it all in. They're one of their best favourite bands out there were promoting this stuff. I mean, how much damage do you think that could have done, or has done?
It's hard to really say, but I can't imagine it's done anything good. I'd say it's a good bit of damage, because people will take this advice seriously. You can even see then the people in the crowd are taking this all in and giving her, cheering her on and giving her a round of applause for saying stuff that's very dangerous and if it's followed can get people killed, and which she end up dying along with her daughter end up dying from an AIDS related illness, didn't she?
Yeah, that's right. Spoilers. I jumped ahead here. Unfortunately, Christine died, and I think a couple of years before then, really upsettingly, so did her daughter, of an AIDS-related illness. But you're right about people cheering on Christine on stage with the Foo Fighters. I mean, one person screamed out, "Everyone give her a hand," and then everyone started clapping.
Yeah, that really started to annoy me, because that's horrible.
I mean, what else she says as well is the reason I'm here today is because I did not follow the doctor's orders. Oh, sorry, I questioned the doctor's orders, and hindsight's is 2020, isn't it? But even back in the early 2000, this was crap.
Oh yeah, it was. Like, this documentary was released in 2004.
Yep,
sure,
2004.
It was well known. It was, the evidence was there that this.
This is the main problem, I think, with these kind of movies, is they seem to be time locked in whatever time suits them. So this movie was released in 2004, but this whole thing with the Foo Fighters was like even earlier, like a lot earlier than that. The whole uncertainty about AIDS was in the 80s, and so was the monotherapy using AZT. In the 90s, mid-90s is when we had the cocktail therapy coming in. And yet it just seems this documentary just very clearly pick and chooses what it wants all the time throughout it.
Oh yeah, it's cherry picking, and even they use Christine brings up the fact that not the fact, but I'm saying Christine said, she brings up that line that she brought up in the House of Numbers, where she was saying that she was getting these diagnoses that saying she was, HIV positive, HIV negative. She was rehashing that from House of Numbers, or was House of Numbers just a rehash of this story? I just can't remember which came first, but I'm sure that whoever made this documentary would have had to have checked this at least.
For those who don't know, Christine, one of the things that she says, or she did say in interviews and in the documentary House of Numbers and in this one, and on her website, was that she tested positive, unknown, positive, negative, positive on HIV tests But if you actually look at the results themselves, which actually were in the documentary House of Numbers, you can see that she's lying about the time of these tests. And not only that, that's the main thing. She's lying about the time of these tests. The first one, it was positive, but she didn't have the full range of antibodies. So it's basically an example of someone who's been recently infected with HIV, and this test just, I don't want to say jumped the gun, but it kind of presumed if you had, certain amount of things reacting, then you were HIV positive, which is more than likely. The second one, exactly the same results, only it took the more cautious approach and said, okay, you're testing positive for this, it's more than likely that you are infected, but can you come back later when you will have the full range of antibodies and we'll be able to detect it? The third one was a confirmation a year and a half after her first one, yet she kind of spins it in House of Numbers at least, that it only happened a couple of weeks later. And she was testing positive for the full range. The fourth one was a negative, which, like I keep saying, it's entirely possible that she tested negative. We live in an imperfect world, and it could have been a crap test. Someone might not have done it correctly. We don't know. These things happen. And I can understand people being very confused and Christine being very upset by this. But the fifth one was a confirmation test of the third one. So, what do you think it takes for someone to do this, to lie about their results to convince others that these tests are rubbish?
To be honest, I don't know. It's ideology coming before the evidence. She went into this, I would assume I think Christine was just desperate and heartbroken and thought that, was just in denial. And she was willing to do anything to convince herself that she was not sick. That's kind of what I got from her, that she was so in denial that she was not sick, and that she basically lied to herself and lied to others. Now, maybe, I don't know, I can't, confirm that. I wish I had psychic abilities to be able to do that, but yeah. I don't, so I just kind of have to kind of take what I can see and kind of believe in, still have my faith in somewhere in humanity, that she wasn't maliciously going out there just to do that.
It's hard to know what people's reasons behind things. I think it's a crappy question I gave you. But anyway, you guys on Internet Land have probably heard this all before, because it's very similar so far to House of Numbers. But after this, it starts going more interesting, shall we say.
Yeah.
So it starts to say about how HIV tests work, which is similar to what we've discussed previously on the podcast. Now, Kitch, what do you say to people who say, well, HIV tests, they don't test for HIV, they test for antibodies, therefore it doesn't work?
The antibody-antigen binding, at the start of an infection, the antibodies produced aren't very strong. But over the course of the infection, that antibody-antigen affinity becomes stronger. So the antibody gets better throughout the course of the experiments, or the course of the infection. So it's maybe at the start of the infection, the antibodies not be so strong, but certainly as you get on in weeks, the antibody-antigen binding is quite strong, and you don't test for one antigen. You test for a selection of antibody-antigen, and I just don't understand why they're doubting, or they're not trying to create this doubt of the antibody-antigen. What do you think?
Well, I think a lot of it. These people back in the day, they tended to read the pamphlets that came with these tests. Yeah. And there's always going to be the exceptions with these things. You're always going to find people who are going to test positive for X, Y, and Z because of certain things that are different with them.
Yeah, so it's like pregnancy.
Yeah, but when she was saying pregnancy, that doesn't mean that everyone who's pregnant is going to test positive for this test. By no means whatsoever.
Sorry, could I just say... Sorry, I know that sounded bad when you said that when there's something wrong with them. Obviously, pregnancy, there's actually... Just want to make that absolutely clear. That I'm not knocking pregnancy, or anyone pregnant. Sorry, just want to make sure because
I
know
don't think that
some.
needed clarifying, did it?
I know there's going to be some smart arse in the comments that will point that out. So I just want to make sure. I know who who you are.
Yeah, I don't know. We invite you on the show, and you call people who comment on our lovely podcast smart arses. God, terrible. So anyway, it then moves on to talk about. It's all very dry so far, the movie. Don't worry, it gets into more interestingness later. And also, I have to say, by the way, did you notice that this one had some really good counterpoints in this movie?
Yeah, I was actually brought. I actually. Yeah, they had some good counterpoints, which is very unusual for
Yeah.
a anti-science documentary such as this.
Well, the only other one I can think of that did it as well, I'm not sure if it was as well. GMO OMG did a really good job at doing the counter arguments, but he tended to ignore them. But they were there.
Oh,
So
yeah.
tip of the hat to this guy. This one, the counter arguments, they're only tiny. They're literally in there for 10, 20 seconds each. There's hardly any of them. But the guys who they interviewed are fucking snipers. They literally, boom, shoot everyone down the previous 20 minutes beforehand.
Yeah. But that's overlooked, I'd say.
Oh, definitely. It's definitely overlooked. But they're in this documentary, which is a shit ton more than House of Numbers. House of Numbers has one part where one scientist says, he says something on the lines of, "I've flat out told Peter Duisberg, who we'll get to later, that he's killing people." And that's pretty much the only part in the documentary that is in any way like a counter to anything that's been said there. But this one has great examples. And it has someone who's my new hero, who I want to talk about later, called... well, never mind, I'll get to him later. So anyway, next we have a chemist talking about how HIV has never been isolated. And that really everyone's... Okay, I'm not sure what he was getting here. Was he saying that everyone is actually infected with HIV, or they produce things that look like HIV, and all you need to do is get them to express this virus? Is this what this guy was getting at?
I literally, to be honest, I left that entire movie absolutely confused about what the point was. So it was so shoddily done. I'm not actually too sure what his point was. As far as I know, that they're saying that they haven't isolated the virus, or they haven't said there was no electron micrographs of the virus. There was no... I'm not too sure. I think at one point he said that one of the methods, it was co-culture, where they isolated out the patient's white blood cells and then stimulated it with interferon gamma, I think it was. And it was a bunch of different compounds that stimulate the immune response. Generally, what happens during the course of an infection, and that gets these cells active. And then they say, oh, but these viruses weren't isolated from the person. It was from the patient. They were done in vivo. At that point, I went, yeah, but they're from the blood cells that person produced. If that person was not infected with the virus, this stimulation will not cause these viruses to be produced. Like, what is your point?
Yeah, this bit got me particularly angry because it was a chemist saying it. A fellow chemist. No! We're supposed to be better than those crappy biologists and physicists out there.
Hey!
Sorry. No, but yeah, he says this, and I honestly just didn't get what he was talking about. I yeah, like you, I was like, is he saying that this is a result of doing this like in the lab? Is this everyone's infected? What is he saying here?
Yeah, and I was at a loss really. I was thinking, right, do you actually need TEM images of the virus to confirm that person is infected with HIV?
Unfortunately, I've talked to a lot of HIV dissidents, and they all want that for their infection.
But it's so impractical.
I know.
But I've done TEM before on just basic nanoparticle samples, and I know, talking to people who have done TEM, that it's quite difficult to do bio-TEM. It's quite difficult and challenging to do. So to do that with a patient is just not practical, especially when there are better molecular biology tools out there, such as...
Do you want to explain what it is for our listeners?
Sure. I'll try to explain as best I can. I'm not a physicist, so TEM... Basically, when you want to look at a biological sample, there are different techniques involved. There are two different methods in which you can look at it. There's light microscopy, which will involve various other things. And then you can use electron microscopy. Now you can use light microscopy to image samples that are about under a micron, just to around 1 micron bacteria size. So mammalian cell to bacteria. Viruses are much smaller, about they're nanometer size. You can't use light microscopy to image viruses. I've still got nanoparticles on my head. To image viruses because they're just far too small for them to work. You won't get that decent resolution. So you need, because the wavelength of light is just far too long.
It's too big.
Yeah, it's too big. So in order to do that, in order to see these viruses, you need radiation that is of a wavelength that's much shorter. So basically, instead of using light, you can use electron beams. Instead of light beams, you can use electron beams. And because their wavelength is much shorter, so you can get much greater resolution down to... I can't remember the exact limit of resolution for TEM or HRTM. You can get to nanometers, angstroms. Can you get to angstroms with TEM?
Oh God, don't ask me.
But I know
times 10 to the minus 10. I don't know.
Yeah, 10 to the minus 10. But you can get very much better. You can see these viruses using electron microscopy.
Did you ever, by any chance, listen to the podcast me and James did, where we actually talked to the author of an AIDS denialist book, and we were trying to explain to him that no, light's too big, you can't physically see something, and he's like, oh well, it's computer made, so then it's essentially worthless.
That's bollocks, really. Sorry. You can the first image that you see when I'm doing my TEM, the first image I seen is not on the computer, but the image is on a fluorescent surface. So the electrons come in, do their thing, hit a fluorescent screen, and that's what generates the image. You can then use computers to take that image. But yeah, and computers are involved with manipulating the beam because, we have the technology. There's nothing wrong with using computers to manipulate the beam to get a high resolution image. That's just...
No, Kitch, you don't understand. You're part of the conspiracy, mate.
Of course. Remember, send my check out early. But I just when he said that, I was just, this person has never been actually anywhere near a TEM or been involved with electron microscopy.
I don't think this guy's done anything outside of a synthesis lab. Because the way he was talking about how there's no papers, or how there's no images of HIV, there's no data that this particle exists.
But there's plenty. Literally, Google is your best friend.
Even in 2004, Google was your mate.
Yeah, it's just, or even before that, a local library, or a university. But of course, they're all paid off, aren't they? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
What am I thinking?
But one bit I really liked about this, and the documentary was trying to make this guy seem like a fool because he was essentially saying what we just said. And his name was, am I saying this right? Is it Charles Farting?
Possibly. I'm the worst ass for name pronunciations. I'm always getting people's names wrong, and it leads to a few embarrassing moments.
Well, anyway, this guy with an interesting name, I'm pretty sure that was his name. He essentially said what we said. Going back to way before what you said, that essentially this particle isn't in large quantities going around your body after infection. it's essentially part of you. It's a part of your immune system, and you need to, if you get your immune system to start expressing it, then, that happens towards the end when you get full-blown AIDS. But that's essentially what he was saying, and it makes sense to people who study HIV.
Yeah.
But this movie was trying to make it seem as if like that's ridiculous. If it's not in large quantities in your blood so long after infection, then it doesn't make any sense.
It's just that kind of, I don't know, I was just stunned by the way that they were making it out, like you just said. The virus it's just, did these people not actually read the papers on this HIV infection, or know anything about its infection cycle or anything?
Again, it's hard to know what these people are thinking.
Are they thinking?
Well, I don't know. But even back in the day, in 2004, I can understand late 80s.
Yeah.
That when, it still was fairly new. I don't know what it was like getting papers back in the day. I can't imagine a time going to university or whatever without not having access to some kind of electronic paper finder. I can't even imagine how people did research. Do you know how they did it?
Actually, funny enough, one of my lecturers actually was telling me that when he was doing his PhD in DCU, they just had to pretty much go to the library and had to find these papers, and if they didn't have them, they had to order them.
Savages.
Yeah. This is so, just the advent of technology, Google, Web, PubMed, all these different websites get papers like that, makes research so much handier.
I tell you what, I wouldn't be where I am now without SciFinder. I love SciFinder. I can do like a month's worth of research in the library in 10 minutes whilst eating a bacon sandwich. It's amazing. Basically, SciFinder is you just draw in the chemicals you want to make, or the reagents you have, or what have you, and it will try and find publications for you, and it's fantastic. I can't imagine a world without it. I'm that lazy. Anyway, sorry.
My fourth year would have been an absolute nightmare without Web of Knowledge or PubMed.
So what you're saying is scientists have got lazy these days.
Yep. I don't doubt it.
So anyway, back on with the movie. Next, we're introduced to Kary Mullis, who was... would you say was the inventor of PCR?
Yeah, as far as I know, he did come up with the reaction, but...
See, I always thought of PCR as one of those inevitable things.
PCR is just one of those ideas that you'd think was just a couple of lab mates out for a drink at work, and they just go, you know what? I have an idea. It just seems like one of those things. As one of my lecturers actually would call it the pub idea. And it's the PCR is the polymerase chain reaction. It's used to amplify DNA from maybe a copy to over. Trying to do the math now in my head.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, you can use it to, among other things, amplify DNA, or you can use it to put in mutations. And but the thing is, what I'm getting at is it's one that, and this isn't poisoning the world, by the way. This isn't taking anything away from what Kary Mullis did. But I always thought of it as just something that eventually would be discovered or found out, kind of like evolution with Charles Darwin. I was like, well, it was inevitable,
Oh yeah.
I don't know, maybe I'm just being a jerk. Anyway, for those who don't know, Kary Mullis is an AIDS dissident, AIDS, HIV dissident, I don't know what they call him, AIDS denialist. I've been told off for saying that, because they don't like it, and it's technically incorrect. It's something that kind of stuck. So HIV distant, HIV AIDS distant, I think is what they prefer. So I'm being polite.
Okay, sure, I'll try to use that as well. Sure, may as well try to get the terminology right.
Yeah. So anyway, he is a distant because PCR, among other things, can help detect HIV, or be used to detect it. And he says this isn't true. This is something that we've covered in a previous episode as well. But yeah, it just seems to be in these movies just the standard cast of people. Now, I'm sure if you've watched enough AIDS denialist documentaries as I had, or read enough books, it's interesting just seeing the same people come up over and over and over again. And this is obviously, he's a big guy. I mean, here we have like a Nobel Prize winner saying that, you know what, it's a load of baloney.
Yeah, but and whenever I go into these kind of science denialist debates and somebody brings up an argument from authority, the first person I always go to is, well,
Jesus.
Sorry, that...
You're right.
Yeah, no, sorry, that kind of got me off guard. Is Carrie Mullis. Because, you know, he is, you know, a Nobel Prize winner. He is, you know, he's really a great guy for what he's done here, you know, with this PCR that's revolutionized, you know, biotechnology and molecular biology. Without this technique, we would be very, very, you know, it would be this technology, you know, biotechnology and molecular biology would be quite a ways back. But Kerry Mullis is an unusual guy. He's an unusual guy because, as far as I know, he not only is he doesn't believe that HIV causes AIDS, or he doesn't accept global warming or climate change. If I got my information correct there.
I didn't know that. But this doesn't take away from anything he's saying regarding HIV and AIDS.
Oh, yeah.
It just it's just an interesting one. He comes at it from the same point of view. He's just like, well, these tests don't work. But it's kind of like, well, what's happening then? Where do we have this whole industry coming from? Is everyone in on this like conspiracy? Are they all just misguided? And another thing I noticed, whilst watching this documentary, which is true for a lot of them actually, is how American centralized they are.
Yeah, actually that's a good point. Actually, yeah, I didn't really pick up on it when I was watching it, but when you mention it there, I suppose it is quite American centric. It's
kind of odd because you see it with them all, like any anti-GMO vaccine ones, whatever, and you know, coming from Europe, like yourself. The first thing I think of was, well, that's not happening here. So, like, what's a perfect example? Monsanto's glyphosate, God, people are going to think I work for them soon, causes autism. That's why we see the rates in autism increase in America. Well, we see that in the UK as well, but we don't have glyphosate used on, like, such a scale here. So that's destroyed right there and then, without any thought.
That's cherry picking, really. Just... You know, it's easier to just isolate to one country and then... Would it be cherry picking, or is it just more...
insular?
Yeah, it's... For that example, you know, it's well, this is happening in our country, but we're not going to bother to see if it's happening across, you know, other countries, or is there any way that we can support this even more by going abroad and looking at Europe, as I say, where autism rates are increasing, but glyphosate is not used on such a scale. But that's I never actually heard that claim before, though. I thought it was thimerosal that was the cause of autism.
Oh, it's everything. I did a video recently. I hate saying that because time-wise, I never know when these podcasts come out, but I literally just typed in autism caused by, and then I just had a guess, and I was like, nuclear power, boom. I had articles there, caused by TVs, caused by Wi-Fi, caused by vaccines, obviously, caused by, what was the funniest one? Oh, artificial sugars. I think Wi-Fi was my favourite, though.
Yeah, that one. That's
but
just,
no,
I'm everything causes autism according to these guys, which is kind of odd.
Gluten, that's another one.
I never heard. But
anyway,
that one.
Back on.
That's a new one. I've added to the list.
Anyway, back onto the documentary, and why I think these documentaries tend to be really insular, is that it starts talking about the first people who they recognised as a problem in the early to mid 80s. these homosexual men from New York and California who were, their immune systems were collapsing and they were suffering from, diseases that they shouldn't be getting.
Yeah.
And it says, these people were, having orgies all the time. This is what the documentary is saying, that they were taking all kinds of drugs, that they had all kinds of STDs. And it's saying that's what caused their immune systems to fail. And you think, okay, right, fair enough. Okay, let's say 100% that's the case with these people, this small group of people back in the day when HIV and AIDS, was going under before HIV was discovered. Sorry?
Yeah, so no, sorry, I was just going to say, actually, just on that, that seems to be another contradiction, really, because I remember earlier in the film, actually at the very start, they had Michael Elner, who was saying that, or was trying to at least suggest that that AIDS was more of a mental thing, that it was more of a, you were diagnosed with this, so that's what kind of brings on the death, and then they have.
Yeah, you're right.
And by the way, I actually have a note right here from my reading the film. Michael Elner actually has a website that actually advocates something called quantum focusing.
What?
Yep, I have no idea what that is. I just saw that and went, yeah, that. I think I can guess what that is.
I don't understand the use of quantum in everyday, like, it's quantum. Fucking Buck keeps saying that to me and I still don't flipping get it. Yeah. So anyway, back onto this insular, I think, thing. Well, they're saying that and you think, okay, fair enough, whatever. Let's say that is the case with these people. But then you think, what about where, HIV is rampant in other parts of the world where this kind of lifestyle doesn't really happen? So you think first thing that jumps to mind is South Africa.
Yeah.
Where I can't imagine there'd be too many people having promiscuous gay sex on lots of drugs whilst having lots of STDs and, partying all night. I can't imagine too many people around there in the 80s were doing that.
No, it just seems to be more of a, let's blame the gays. That's what I find with these kind of documentaries, it was the gay people.
Well, no, I have to disagree with you. It wasn't doing that. It was saying that these scientists were blaming the gays.
Ah, okay.
Because it definitely was doing that. It was saying that, the media in general was saying, we've got something to, pin against certain people in society we don't like. So intravenous drug users and gay men, promiscuous gay men. And it was saying, it was almost going down the conspiracy route. But it wasn't playing the homophobic card. Like, as in, it wasn't, the documentary itself wasn't homophobic. It was trying to pitch these scientists and the media as being homophobic. That's what I got from this point.
Ah, okay.
I might be wrong, though.
Yeah,
what do you think?
I've only really seen this film once because I couldn't really bring myself to watch it again. But yeah, no, maybe I kind of got my wires crossed at that stage. Maybe I was just viewing the film. At this stage, I was kind of getting really annoyed, so maybe it didn't I didn't see the film in any way favourable, so I think that maybe have coloured my viewing.
I'm starting to think I'm dead on the inside. I had no emotion watching this, hardly. Yeah. Anyway, so next it talks about poppers being the cause of AIDS. Have you heard this before?
I've heard that in your series, The House and Numbers rebuttal, but I think it came up in a concordance video as well, didn't it?
Yeah, it did, yeah. There might actually be a slight link between HIV infection and poppers. It's very, very slight, and it's a bit wishy-washy. It mainly says that, people who take poppers are... Well, no, not mainly. It's saying that some people who take poppers take it whilst having anal sex, and that basically... what's it do? Does it dilate the
blood vessels? Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. And that could... Yeah, and it could mean that kind of sexual contact could basically increase the likelihood of rupture, and then you have like a way of the virus getting into your system. Mm-hmm. So that's like the only slight link that I've seen some STD websites talk about regarding poppers and HIV. It's not that poppers in any way cause AIDS.
Yeah, I can, I can see where that would be a slight link. But yeah, no, it's not in itself the cause. You know, do you have there's just some things that can enhance your likelihood of, such as obviously wearing a condom during sex. It increases, if you don't wear a condom, it increases your likelihood, but it's not the cause, if that makes sense.
Wasn't that a thing going around Africa, that condoms are actually the cause of AIDS?
Who was spreading that again? Was it sorry, was that the Catholic Church? I think there was something on that I remember seeing before, but then again, my memory of that is not quite. It's not quite good.
That does kind of ring a bell, but I remember it definitely was a thing. There was lots of horrible things going on back in the day. Like if you sleep with a virgin, it'll cure you AIDS and stuff like that. That's pretty nasty. Mm-hmm. But yeah, one thing that it says in this documentary as well is that poppers, the compound that they're made from, is it can do magical things. Basically, no, it can't. They basically said like it's a massive immune suppressor, yada yada. It can do X, Y, and Z, and they compared it to AZT. It looks nothing like AZT whatsoever. And you know, AZT is a nucleoside inhibitor. So nucleoside inhibitor? No, it's not. It's a nucleoside analog. And that's how it inhibits the proteins it's dealing with. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Well, to get stone on topic, I'm just making a fool of myself and my lack of knowledge on this subject. So yeah, again, we have more examples of being time locked. So it seems to be jumping all over the place regarding to people being infected with HIV and the kind of therapies they were on. Next, oh no, wait, sorry, I've missed a bit. So it talks more about the drugs, doesn't it? And this is the time lock bit. It goes on about the AZT monotherapy and says the side effects from that, which there were. And, you know, it's kind of saying that... It's kind of wanting to pretend that, you know what, all drugs don't really have side effects. You know, they're all fine. It's just AIDS drugs that are particularly nasty. And you think, no, you know, HIV it's not a nice virus, and it's hard to go for. Yeah, I mean, that's not excusing these side effects of these drugs, even though in 2015 it's certainly a lot better than it was back in the day. But it's almost implying that, you know, drugs shouldn't have side effects. Did you get that as well, or is that just me?
No, I got that there. And the one thing I've been saying is to go after a virus, it's quite difficult. It's not like going after a bacteria or a fungi where you can target the certain metabolic processes such as cell wall synthesis or going after a certain ribosome. Sorry. In the virus, what's doing the actual viral assembly is pretty much the cell. So you really need to really specifically design your drug to go after the key components. Actually, I think modern HIV therapy, they go after the reverse transcriptase enzyme. Am I right on saying that?
Well, there's loads of ones that can go for. There's like the mechanism of how it actually infects the cell in the first place. They can go after the proteins that make up that, and they essentially stop it from working. AZT does go does go after reverse transcriptase, but it also goes after, you know, your regular transcriptase,
which is not a great thing to be targeting.
No, but yeah, these drugs work because people have looked into what makes up the HIV particle and they've said, aha, we can make an inhibitor that will stop this protein from doing what it's meant to do, and then the particle won't go off and infect another one, or the particle will be useless, or it won't do what it's meant to do. But this is like... I mean, this is like, if we give the movie a bit of credit, 2004, this still was around in 2004, but they are jumping time-wise to the early 90s and taking examples from people from the early 90s, which I thought was very underhanded. And next, oh, fuck me, right, this David Rashdick or whatever again, you know the chemist we talked about beforehand?
Yeah, I remember.
Oh, he comes back, awesome. And he says...
You're not a fan, I can see.
No. Well, honestly, just he was the one bit that got like an eyebrow raise from me, just like the fucker. He says this. He says There is no evidence that people live longer who take these drugs.
Oh, I remember that.
Fuck.
I was like, oh. At that stage, I just had to, right? Nope. I'm going. Nope. I'm done. I'll be back in 5-10 minutes. I need a sandwich.
Yeah, I couldn't believe this. It's just unbelievable. I mean, this is where this documentary really starts changing from the regular ones. I mean, the other people just go on about AZT being terrible, but they never really talk about the cocktail. They kind of like slightly mention it, but they kind of put it off to the side because, you know, they realise as soon as you look the tiniest bit at it, you can see that people dying dramatically drop. So they try and, you know, back away from this because this is like a weak corner in their defence. But this movie just flat out says, documentary, sorry, flat out says, oh, just don't take the drugs, you know, because people who take the drugs, there's no evidence they live longer. Oh, by the way, someone on our Facebook, I can't remember his name, said that, you know what, we shouldn't really call these movies documentaries at all, because it's giving them credit. What do you think about that?
I don't know what you could really call them. I suppose you can have documentaries, but have a common either side. You know, to the I wish you could had a video. You know, the documentaries. You know, air quotes. That's the phrase. Air quotes.
Air quotes. That's what we need. Like Dr. Evil air quotes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Documentaries.
Or I don't know, mockumentaries, because there are.
Oh, mockumentaries. That's good.
Oh. And because really, I think either I see where he's getting that from though, so I can certainly agree, but yeah, or just crap documentaries. I think that's probably because that's what they are. Like I don't know. I certainly agree. Actually, yeah. Suppose.
I think this mockumentary has broken you slightly. You just seem to be like, God, I just hate it. I want people to know how much I hate it.
Exactly. It was. Yeah.
There was one bit here though. I fucking looked into, and because you know something when you're like, right, my spider sense is tingling here. This doesn't quite make sense. Mm-hmm. And it was the bit where it was talking about a woman who was HIV positive. Her partner wasn't, and they had a child together. And the government forced them, the child, to have AZT.
Yeah, that kind of does. I could see that. Yeah, based on everything this documentary has done and said so far, that it's probably not so simple.
Yeah, there was something slightly off. Now I don't know what it's like in America. I know. I think it is. Not forced, but if you've got HIV parents, I think as soon as the child is born, don't get me wrong, right? When you're pregnant, I can totally understand people not wanting to take medication. Mm-hmm. It's fine, and the government does in America and in England. I can say they do give parents a certain level of leeway when it comes to medical treatment with their children. It's led to a few problems, certainly here in the UK. I mean, there was one recently where parents have taken their child and run away because they don't want it to have anti-cancer therapy and stuff like that. But with this one...
Yeah, I remember that actually quite recently. Well, it was quite recently. It was a few months ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it happens all the time, yeah. But this one, there was something very strange about it. And it was introduced by Christine Majori, who was giving this talk in front of the mayor of San Francisco, I think it was. And she was saying just the usual stuff. HIV tests don't work, yada yada yada. It was just like a prepared script. But then she was talking about this woman who gave birth and her being HIV positive and the father wasn't. And then she just said right at the end, and you know they forced them to have this child to have AZT, and she wasn't allowed to breastfeed. I was like, wait, what? That little thing at the end. What do you mean by that? So I looked into it, and it turns out. This mother, who's HIV positive, breastfed her child. And that's when the government really came in. And they were like, whoa. Can kind of understand you not taking medication when you're pregnant. That's your choice. But, you know, we know this is a way that HIV can be transmitted. You are knowingly, or you are actually, potentially infecting your child here. And this is where the government actually got in. This was actually a major thing in the early 2000s and late 1999 about the right to breastfeed if you're HIV positive. Apparently, this was a thing in America, and the government and the health service over there were like, no. This is a proven way of becoming infected. You don't do this.
Yeah, I just was watching that particular part, and I was like, this was well known at this time. You should not breastfeed if you're HIV positive, because not only, hey, fair enough, you don't take the drugs, that you're all alive.
Yes, I can see that.
Yeah, I don't really, but to each his own, really, for that. If you're not damaging anyone else, but for that particular practice, it's
reckless and
that
dangerous.
is dangerous. Yeah, it's very dangerous, and you could infect your child with this virus. It's just, I just couldn't believe that someone would actually do this.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are benefits to being breastfed, same as there are benefits to having a natural birth. But when it comes to something like this, the risks totally outweigh any benefit that you would get from that as a child.
Yeah, I wouldn't. But at that time, I was more like, yes, I would totally agree with the government stepping in here and saying, no, this is not acceptable.
Well, this is why
this is the child, child protection. Really, you're protecting the child from being infected with the HIV. Now, maybe. No, you shouldn't be able to do that.
No, this is exactly what happened. I mean, it was so sneaky the way this documentary did it. It lightly tapped it when Christine said it, and it lightly tapped it again when the mother actually talked about it. But if you weren't paying attention, you just watching it, you would think that this mother was forced to give her child this medication that is really horrific, which it is. But it totally misses out the main point here about the breastfeeding. And I a quick look at that, and I was like, right, yeah, this is, this is valuable information that's missing out of this documentary. But next, I tell you what, it has a feckin' legend in this documentary.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Oh, who am I talking about here then?
For the life of me, can't remember his name, but...
Is it Mark Wahlberg? Wahlberg.
I think so.
It's not Mark Wahlberg. Marky Mark.
Also, one of my most favourite actors, but...
Is he?
I liked him in Ted and...
the M. Night Shyamalan
Departed
movie.
Oh god, no, that doesn't count. That movie never happened.
Fair enough. What do I like? No, he's alright in Ted. Ted's alright. It's good.
The Departed, that's my favourite movie. It's just so good.
What? No, wait. The Departed is terrible.
Yeah.
Is one of the...
you and me need to have words after this.
I'm not kidding you. I really didn't like it. I watched it and was like, this is just terrible. I'm sorry. I just... Everyone loves that film and I just can't stand it. It's like... what's the other DiCaprio film that everyone loves? Inception. Can't stand it.
I haven't seen Inception, but...
You're not missing much. It's someone going, it's a dream within a dream within a dream, and just going, bow, and then just injecting drama where there doesn't need to be any. And then everyone in the audience being like, oh, it's so clever. Bollocks, is it?
I can see why people don't like The Departed. I just like it because of Mark Wahlberg's character, Jack Nicholson's character. There's just characters in that movie that I just liked. That's kind of a... that's probably a different movie that we should save for another day, unfortunately.
Yeah. So anyway, this guy's called Mark. Is it Wahlberg? I'm going to say. And the guy's
better than anything I could think of.
The guy's a legend because he essentially just stops the documentary and just goes, "The fuck are you talking about?" Do you want to explain this bit?
Actually, I have a kind of what. He asks him, "Oh, what is your opinion?" He says, "I don't have an opinion." And it's like, "Didn't you do the research?" And he says, "I'm doing the research right now." And he was like, "How could you make a documentary on this topic if you haven't researched it first?" Pretty much, that's... I know I'm paraphrasing a lot, but he just pretty much said, "Why are you making this documentary if you haven't done the research?"
Yeah, and the guy behind the camera, I think he called him Robin or something. And he basically was like, "What the fuck, dude?" Because he's basically saying that he was Robin or whatever his name was trying to get him towards the whole AIDS distant kind of group. And this is where this Mark guy pulled back and was like, "Wait, do you think HIV causes AIDS?" And when Mark was like, "Oh, I don't know," he's like, "What the fuck do you mean you don't know?" Like, it's pretty much set in stone. And it has that little clip that you described really well. But then later on, bravo when Mark just says, what was it again? People who are AIDS denialists are perpetrators of death. He says something on those lines. And then he goes on about Peter Duisberg, who I've called a mass murderer by proxy, who I totally believe is. And he says, Peter Duisberg is the closest thing we have in this world to a scientist psychopath. He says something on those lines. And I was just like, fuck me, you were saying what we're all saying, bravo. And then he just says, right, fuck this movie and with me being interviewed is over. I'm not having any part because, I feel that you may edit me inappropriately.
And I suspect he was.
Oh, no.
Or at least
I don't think he was.
Unfavourably to the audience who this is actually marketed for.
I don't think he was edited unfavourably as in cut mid-sentence. I think he was placed in a part of the movie that made it look as in HIV research is dogmatic. I think that's where it was kind of placed in that kind of region. But the fact that it's all in there, I mean, when he goes on this rant about AIDS denialists, I mean, you could tell, like, he is furious. He has seen people die because of this. And he is very aware of what Duisberg has done. And you could see the anger and like the venom in every word that he's saying. To be fair, again, this is one bit that this documentary filmmaker left in. Bravo to him, tip of the hat.
I was surprised it was left in, to be honest.
Because it's not short either. It's like a minute and a half of this guy just doing this monologue, just literally sniping everyone down. And just well played to him. Mark, what a guy. I owe you a pint if I ever see you.
That just made the movie for me. That little bit there, just his rant, just saying, this isn't a game. This isn't, something that's, a topic for, an intellectual debate or anything. This is serious. Yeah. This is real. People are dying, and people who are promoting this doubt is the root cause of so much suffering by people who aren't taking their meds, who aren't, are just people who are scared and desperate and just looking for any way of being well again.
Well, he says, this is direct quote, Peter Duisberg belongs in jail. I mean, you gotta love this guy. And this is what I think, this is why I wanted to talk about this documentary, because it is slightly different than other AIDS denialist documentaries in that it has these counterpoints, and I've never seen before someone put down an entire documentary in such a small amount of time, relatively, because the thing's like an hour and a half long. But bravo to this guy. You can tell that he's seen people die because of this.
Yeah, it's quite clear that he has seen the negative effects of the HIV, the HIV dissidents, that's right, HIV dissidents. You can see that he has seen the negative consequences of this movement, and all I could see was I was just almost applauding as he was going on this rant of his. I hate to use the word rant because it kind of belittles that moment, if you know what I mean. This his monologue, maybe his monologue of his, it was just so inspiring. It was so good.
At the end of a bad documentary, it was so good.
Yeah, it was. And if anything to say if I could actually say one good thing about the documentary, it was that little gem in the pile of vacuous crap that made it. That was just good.
Anyway, so the rest of it is It's probably about 15, 20 minutes longer, and there was nothing there. There was Peter Duisberg, mass murderer by proxy, saying, people hate me. Oh, I wonder why. And then he goes, you know what, questioning things is good. And I agree. But you know what, you should have fucking proper questions, and when the answer is given to you, you shouldn't ignore it because, you don't feel like it, or for whatever reason. And this is essentially the end. Nothing else happens in the last 20 minutes. It has a little slideshow of people after the documentary was released, but I didn't even bother watching that, so I turned it off, boring. But yeah, that essentially is the documentary. I thought it was an interesting one, just mainly for that guy at the end, and a few of the things, that chemist who flat out said that, the drugs don't work. But what did you think of it? Would you recommend it to anyone to watch?
If you're looking for a bad documentary, or just want to see the kind of the arguments that are out there that, these people are saying, this is a good kind of resource to kind of to know what the AIDS dissidents, sorry, I cannot pronounce that word, dissidents are saying. It's a good resource, but as for actual facts and knowledge and trying to spruce up, this is it's not that kind of documentary. It's awful, and really, and actually in terms of any entertainment, it's I don't know, I kind of felt bored watching it as well. I went from angry to bored at times watching this movie.
Yeah, I kind of know what you mean. I kind of well, I don't, because I secretly like this kind of shit. So I can watch shit documentary after shit documentary. It takes a lot to bore me. So, for example, I know we've both seen What the Bleep Do We Know? That was boring.
That was ungodly boring.
Yeah, so that's about my level. But I know, because originally we tried to get Buck on the show, but unfortunately he couldn't make it. And he, like, the entire time, whereas you were telling me, what the fuck have you sent me? I'm so angry. He was saying, what the fuck have you sent me? I'm so bored. So I know it is fairly dull. Yeah, I guess.
It's dull, and in terms of... It's just one of those movies. I've never been angry and bored at the same time.
Oh, I have. I've watched The Departed.
Oh, low blow.
Yeah. Cool. So anyway, I think we should close this podcast up to an end. And if hopefully we've been more interesting than the actual documentary itself. Yeah, I probably wouldn't recommend it. If you've seen House of Numbers, it does slightly different things than that, but really, it's still boring and shit. It's shot very flatly. It's very dull. It has great bits in it regarding that Mark Wahlberg or whatever his name is, and that farting guy. That's actually his name. But yeah, it's really dull. I wouldn't recommend you watch it. So anyway, before we go, Kitch, how can people find you if they want to find you? What do you do?
Well, I'm on the Trolling with Logic podcast, so you can look that up on trollingwithlogic.com. I'd be quite featured in the podcasts. And also, I write a blog on Trolling with Logic. It'll be under Bio Inspiration. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm Michael Kitching or Bio Inspiration, whichever way is easier to find me.
Cool, awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Oswald.
Thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
At the same time, it's been a while. I've been thinking about asking you to be on the show for a while. I don't know why I haven't done it, to be honest with you. Sorry. But yeah, I'm glad you're finally on it. So anyway, yeah, here's the end of the podcast. Remember, if you like this, by the way, to, you know what? If you really like us, you should write a description on iTunes, because that would make you absolutely fantastic in my books. And I know a few of you have already, and you guys and guyettes are fucking fantastic. Love you guys. So anyway, if you could do that, that would be really, really, really handy. So anyway, yeah, this is the end of the podcast. So it's goodbye from me, Myles. Goodbye. And it's goodbye from Kitch.
Bye, everybody.
A couple of years before then, really upsettingly, so did her daughter, of an AIDS-related illness. But you're right about people cheering on Christine on stage with the Foo Fighters. I mean, one person screamed out, "Everyone give her a hand," and then everyone started clapping. Yeah,
that really started to annoy me, because that's horrible.
I mean, what else she says as well is, the reason I'm here today is because I did not follow the doctor's orders. Oh, sorry, I questioned the doctor's orders. And hindsight's is 2020, isn't it? But even back in the early 2000, sorry, this was crap.
Oh yeah, it was. Like, this documentary was released in 2004.
Yep,
Sure.
2004.
It was well known. It was, the evidence was there that this.
This is the main problem, I think, with these kind of movies, is they seem to be time locked in whatever time suits them. So this movie was released in 2004, but this whole thing with the Foo Fighters was like even earlier, like a lot earlier than that. The whole uncertainty about AIDS was in the 80s. And so was the monotherapy using AZT. In the 90s, mid-90s is when we had the cocktail therapy coming in. And yet it just seems this documentary just very clearly pick and chooses what it wants all the time throughout it.
Oh yeah, it's cherry picking, and even they use Christine brings up the fact that not the fact, but I'm saying Christine said, she brings up that line that she brought up in the House of Numbers, where she was saying that she was getting these diagnoses that saying she was, HIV positive, HIV negative. She was rehashing that from House of Numbers, or was House of Numbers just a rehash of this story? I just can't remember which came first. But, I'm sure that whoever made this documentary would have had to have checked this at least.
For those who don't know, Christine, one of the things that she says, Robin, or whatever his name was trying to get him towards the whole AIDS distant kind of group. And this is where this Mark guy pulled back and was like, wait, do you think HIV causes AIDS? And when Mark was like, oh, I don't know. He's like, what the fuck do you mean you don't know? Hello there, people of the internet. Welcome to another marvellous episode of League of Nerds, if I say so myself. My name is Myles, and as always, I'm joined by the fabulous James. Hello, James. Oh yeah, he's not here today because he's buggered off to America or somewhere. So it's just me from the co-host, I don't know what I'm saying here. It's just me out of the two of us today. But we have a special guest. We have Kitch from Trolling with Logic. Hello there.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, sir. How are you?
Can't complain. So, I invited you on the show, and my topic that we were going to talk about today is, it's another documentary. And I know how much the internet loves when we do documentaries, and this documentary is called The Other Side of HIV and AIDS, which is pretty interesting. How did you find it?
Well, I believe I was messaging you throughout my viewing of it, saying it went from this is interesting to oh my god, the rage. It started off with this is interesting, and then the more I went on to it, it was just I could barely watch it. I had to step away from the computer a few times. I even messaging the tool guy saying I was so close to punting my laptop off the off the top of my house. It was.
See, I've become so desensitized to this kind of stuff now. I was able to watch it pretty much in one go, but I can imagine younger me 2 years ago watching this and just getting really wound up. I mean, it is pretty bad. I mean, have you seen House of Numbers?
Believe it or not, I haven't. And I know there's a reason for that. One is probably for the same reason that will probably get my goat as well. And the second is I really want to do a live pwnage of that with Trolling with Logic. Just because I think the best live pwnages are the ones you go in blind. Because you get more of a reaction out of it. But it was that was one I really do actually want to see how bad is this movie.
That was a shameless plug, Kitch. Shameless plug. No, it's a great podcast. You should check it out, guys and girls of the internet. It's pretty good. So anyway, let's do what we always do in the League of Nerds, and we kind of go through the documentary bit by bit. So this one starts off with what was it? It was the press release, wasn't it? Where we had someone saying that this novel virus is the probable cause of AIDS, And then it jumps to 2000 in Hollywood with the Foo Fighters, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just... And I just actually want to start with it starts with all good kind of anti-science documentary start with some sort of quote from a famous scientist. In this case, it was Einstein. And it was saying, question everything. I forgot the actual quote, I didn't actually write it down. But it's kind of ironic from a HIV denialist movie because, you know, how open they are to being questioned. But I just found it odd also that they said that Robert Gallo did not present any evidence about HIV, or any papers. But there are, when I tried to look up this online, there are HIV deniers trying to get his papers retracted. So that's kind of an odd thing to put in.
Yeah, I mean, well, HIV denialists or dissidents, whatever you want to call them, aren't known for being, being cohesive
Consistent.
or anything. Consistent, that's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, so anyway, with the movie, so it starts with the Foo Fighters, which I actually found out, I remember back in 2000 when I was on their website, I used to be a massive Foo Fighters fan. Did you used to like them?
The Foo Fighters, I never really got into them. I didn't particularly dislike them. I don't really get into too many bands. I kind of like different songs from here and there. But following bands I would not actually do, except for the Dropkick Murphys, but they're the only band I'd actually actively follow.
Right, I was going to say, how old are you, by the way? He did say in interviews and in the documentary House of Numbers and in this one, and on her website, was that she tested positive, unknown, positive, negative, positive on HIV tests. But if you actually look at the results themselves, which actually were in the documentary House of Numbers, you can see that she's lying about the time of these tests. And not only that, that's the main thing. She's lying about the time of these tests. The first one, it was positive, but she didn't have the full range of antibodies. So it's basically an example of someone who's been recently infected with HIV, and this test just, I don't want to say jumped the gun, but it kind of presumed if you had, certain amount of things reacting, then you were HIV positive, which is more than likely. The second one, exactly the same results, only it took the more cautious approach and said, okay, you're testing positive for this, it's more than likely that you are infected, but can you come back later when you will have the full range of antibodies and we'll be able to detect it? The third one was a confirmation a year and a half after her first one, yet she kind of spins it in House of Numbers at least, that it only happened a couple of weeks later. And she was testing positive for the full range. The fourth one was a negative, which, like I keep saying, it's entirely possible that she tested negative. We live in an imperfect world, and it could have been a crap test. Someone might not have done it correctly. We don't know. These things happen. And I can understand people being very confused and Christine being very upset by this. But the fifth one was a confirmation test of the third one. So, what do you think it takes for someone to do this, to lie about their results to convince others that these tests are rubbish?
To be honest, I don't know. It's ideology coming before the evidence. She went into this, I would assume I think Christine was just desperate and heartbroken and thought that, was just in denial. And she was willing to do anything to convince herself that she was not sick. I'm 26.
Oh God, I'm so old. God, I remember. So back in early 2000s, you would have been a wee burn.
I would have been a young lad. Yeah, I would have been 10, 11 around that time.
Oh God, no, thanks for that. I feel really old. Yeah. Anyway, so 16, 17-year-old me was loving the Foo Fighters, and I remember seeing a link on the front page of their website to Alive and Well with AIDS Alternatives, which is an AIDS denialist group. Sorry, brief. Founded by Christine Majori, who actually is in this film.
I was surprised to see her. No, I was just surprised to see her, but then again, I'm not too certain how prominent she is. But I see that she is actually quite prominent in the HIV denialists. So,
Well, she was. Unfortunately, Christine passed away a fair few years ago. But obviously before she passed away, she was spreading this idea that HIV isn't the cause of AIDS and that HIV tests are useless. And this documentary opens up with her saying this in front of an audience who the Foo Fighters were playing for. And this, I remember when I first saw this, because when I was doing my mini-series on House of Numbers, the other AIDS denialist film, and it was just shocking, because all these people were just, they were cheering, they were taking it all in. They're one of their best favourite bands out there were promoting this stuff. I mean, how much damage do you think that could have done, or has done?
it's hard to really say, but I can't imagine it's done anything good. I'd say it's a good bit of damage, because people will take this advice seriously. You can even see then the people in the crowd are taking this all in and giving her, cheering her on and giving her a round of applause for saying stuff that's very dangerous and if it's followed, can get people killed. And she end up dying, along with her daughter end up dying from an AIDS related illness, didn't she?
Yeah, that's right. Spoilers. I jumped ahead here. Yeah, unfortunately, Christine died, and I think a